So I recently came across this TED Talk that really irritated me, and even though the conclusion is pretty stupid, the way that he comes to it is really pompous and awful, so I wanted to talk about it. The title's already off to a pretty good start. It's called Why the Majority is Always Wrong by Paul Wilkins. And I was writing an article about direct democracy. I thought, maybe this is going to give me a new perspective that'll challenge my views. I ought to watch this. So he starts off with this really cute anecdote about Einstein. Einstein's walking with his assistant, and his assistant asks him, "Oh, why isn't this the exact same test that you gave your students last year? Why are you giving them the same test?" And Einstein says, "Well, all of the answers have changed." And it's a great anecdote because it shows how quickly physics was changing during that time. And what does this have to do with the majority always being wrong? It has nothing to do with the majority always being wrong. He just wanted to put an Einstein quote in there. By the way, Einstein was a socialist. Not that it has anything to do with anything. But, anyway, from here he segues into his main point that if you want to have results that you've never had before, you need to try to do things that you've never done before. Now, this is a pretty tame point. I think Malcolm X has a much better version of it in his autobiography. He tells a story of when he was a kid. He used to go hunting with all these adults, and they would run all of the rabbits into this little clearing where they would all shoot the rabbits. What Malcolm X would do is he would go out in front of everybody and shoot all the rabbits and then run back around to the place where everybody was at and pretend he was there the whole time, I guess. And all the people would think he was this amazing shot, you're wonderful, but actually he was just clever. And the way that he puts it is that if somebody is succeeding better than you, especially if they're in the same field, they're probably doing something different from you. Now, Wilkin does this in a really demeaning way. He says that 97% of people aren't inclined to do anything different. Their brains are lazy, and whenever they encounter an obstacle, they just run up against the wall, run up against the obstacle like some sort of crazy Energizer bunny on steroids. I did not make up that phrase. That is what he says. Then he starts talking about thinking outside the box, and he does it in a way that really undermines his own point. He talks about if you're thinking about making a tasty meal, you're probably going to do it in a bunch of conventional ways. You're probably going to go to the store, buy some ingredients, and cook something at home, or go to a restaurant, blah, blah, blah. But what you're not going to do is go out onto the highway, pick up a dead animal, and take it home and cook it. And then he says that that's a completely normal thing to do in other parts of the world. I don't know how he imagines other people live. I don't think people don't do that out of choice. That's not something they choose to do. Some options people don't take because they're awful. In fact, most options are awful, which is, I'm going to get back to that later. Next part, I can't tell if he made it up. I couldn't find anything online about it. I'm not sure what I would even search up, but he talks about in London, the taxi cab drivers, they have to do this really complex test where they know everything about all the streets in London. So what if instead of that, we also had taxi cab drivers who didn't know anything, and they would just get bossed around by the people getting driven in the taxi cabs? And wouldn't that be a great innovation? It sounds pretty stupid to me. It doesn't sound like if it ever existed, it was successful, but that's thinking outside the box. The only real example he gives of a company thinking completely outside the box is IKEA, which feels almost like the exception that proves the rule. Besides that, he talks about Dell Computers selling their products online, which seems like a pretty obvious innovation to me. Like somebody would have come up with that, instead of calling up a company to deliver their product, then you use the internet to do the exact same thing. Maybe I'm being... So we end up with this circular logic where if you're normal, you're getting normal results, which is what the majority of people are doing. If you're extraordinary, you're getting extraordinary results, which only 3%, I don't know where he gets this number, but only 3% of people are doing. And we want extraordinary results, so normal people, or the majority, or the 97% of people, they're wrong. Now, he's really awful at making arguments and giving examples, so he ends off the video doing what he's really good at, which is belittling people. He paraphrases Marcus Aurelius, saying that the goal of life is not to join the majority, but to escape from the ranks of the clinically insane. Then he leaves us with a choice, which he assures us is completely ours, that we can either break our industry norms and join the 3% of people who really do stuff, or we can join the 97% of people who work for that 3%. Now, there's a comment on the video that I'm really in love with. This guy says, he could be completely lying, but that accent makes me believe every word. And that's how I really feel about the video, is he doesn't have anything interesting to say, and he doesn't say it in a convincing way. He really just has a lot of self-confidence, and I think he genuinely believes that he's superior to other people. Now, I want to make a really quick point about possibility spaces, or thinking outside of the box. The reason why the majority of people do the same things is because those things work. If you want to start a landscaping business, it doesn't make sense to sell people the tools to cut their own lawn. What you should do is you should do what everybody else does. You should go around, advertise the hell out of yourself, and work really hard and do a really good job mowing lawns, and you'll do well. That's how the majority of businesses work. And just because you do something different doesn't mean you're useful. Think about a pair of headphones in your pocket. It seems like no matter how neatly you put the headphones in, they always come out a tangled mess. Why is this? Well, basically, the vast majority of configurations that your headphones can be in are not useful to you. There's only really one configuration you want, which is a nice, neat coil or straight. The vast majority of ways that you can arrange a pair of headphones are tangles, right? I mean, think of how many different ways you could possibly tangle up your headphones. So as you go about your day, you go through random changes. You jostle them around in your pocket, and gradually they become more tangled just because these random changes accumulate over time, and it's basically impossible for you to go from a tangled configuration to an untangled configuration because it's just so unlikely. There's so few untangled configurations, and that's how you can think about the possibility space, is that the vast majority of possibilities are like the tangled headphones. They're not useful for you. A really good example of this in the business world was in 2012 when JCPenney experimented with getting rid of high-low pricing, which was this manipulative pricing technique, well, still is, where they start out with a pair of pants being like $100 or something ridiculous, but then it's on sale for 60% off, so you pay $40 for the pair of pants. It feels like you're getting a deal, but actually the pair of pants is just $40. And they replaced that with everyday low pricing, which they would just sell the pair of pants for $40 straight up. And that ended up tanking their stock by a third, and they got bought out. This is a 118-year-old company that got bought out in 2020. They never recovered. They broke the norms of their business in an ethical way, mind you. They did it in a good way, and they collapsed completely. Now, I could finish off talking about capitalism and how certain ideologies justify hierarchies, and how hierarchies lead to mediocre people being in positions of power and how they justify that. But really, I just wanted to say that this guy is a dick.